A pandemic triggers a war, unleashing monsters that ravage the world. Kim, trapped in his apartment due to his mysterious class, is unable to leave. Despite his confinement, he battles monsters, saves those he can, and gains powerful skills along the way. This is the story of the ultimate shut-in. One day, the world came to a sudden and devastating end. A pandemic broke out, spreading rapidly and infecting countless people. Chaos unfolded as countries struggled to protect their citizens. This led to wars, economic collapse, and severe food shortages. Riots erupted across the globe, but those were not the greatest challenges humanity faced. A far more terrifying threat emerged on the horizon. Monsters, like those from games, descended upon the world, bringing humanity to its knees. Amid this nightmare, humans discovered the ability to awaken classes, gaining powers to fight back against the invaders. However, the devastation had left so few survivors that reclaiming the land and rebuilding civilization became a near impossible task. A few days have passed, and our protagonist's story begins in this building. Sitting on the ground, he eats some chips, reminding himself that the world has not completely ended. As he drinks a fizzy drink, he reflects on how he seems to be living as if nothing has happened. Yet, deep down, he knows he is alone now. He looks down, his gaze wandering across the empty space of the 100-square-meter apartment, and he reflects on how he is the only one living here now. His family, he thinks, is still out there, somewhere. He recalls how his father bought this place, taking out a loan of $200 million from the bank to do so. The family's assets had amounted to around the same, $200 million, an investment that was meant to secure their future. The reason he's alone in this apartment, though, is due to a condition tied to the purchase. Someone must live here for 2 years before his family can fully enjoy the tax benefits of owning it. That is the reason he has been staying here, locked in this apartment since the sudden apocalypse that happened. With a worried look on his face, he glances down at his phone, only to see that the network is still down. He lets out a heavy sigh, frustration building inside him. But just then, a loud noise catches his attention. He quickly looks up toward the source of the sound and sees a shadow moving in the distance. His heart skips a beat as he realizes it's a monster, approaching fast, ready to consume him. Panic takes over as he screams and falls backward, desperately trying to escape. The monster gets closer, its massive form looming over the building as it lets out a terrifying roar. In a moment of sheer fear, he lifts his hands to shield himself and screams, convinced it's the end. But then, everything goes quiet. He cautiously opens his eyes, only to see a system window floating before him, stating that the monster does not have permission to enter. The creature had crashed into an invisible barrier. The shield held firm, forcing the monster to fall helplessly to the ground below. Just then, the system displays his passive skill from his class, the ultimate shut-in. The skill, called House Declaration, states that no one can enter the house without the ruler's permission. He sits up, a wave of relief washing over him, and slowly gets to his feet. Reflecting on the situation, he realizes this skill is the reason he has managed to survive until now. Determined to test his limits, he tries with all his might to open the front door, but it won't budge. Frustrated, he kicks it hard, yet the door remains unmoved. Anger bubbles up as he kicks it again, but it's no use. Gritting his teeth, he steps back, giving up for now. Walking over to the window, he stares out at the chaotic world below. Ever since the apocalypse turned everything upside down, he had gained the ultimate shut-in class. It had protected him from countless dangers, but it had also completely trapped him inside this apartment. He sat down, his eyes fixed on the system notification, and a wave of sadness washed over him. The message confirmed what he had feared: his class prevented him from leaving the apartment. Frustration built up as he stared at the words, his fists clenching. Rubbing his head in irritation, he muttered to himself about how powerless he was in this situation. But as he glanced down, a more immediate concern gripped him: food. He was running low. His fridge had lost power yesterday, and he had been scraping by on-side dishes stored inside. He knew that wouldn't last much longer. Panic began to set in as he thought about his dwindling supplies. Only a few packets of noodles remained. Just then, the system displayed a new notification, catching his attention. It showed that he had defeated a Calican monster, level 23. Another window popped up, stating that he had gained a large amount of experience and that his skill had increased. He stared at the notification in complete shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then, he recalled the monster that had slammed into the barrier. His curiosity piqued. He walked over to the window and looked down. There, sprawled on the ground, was the Calican monster dead. A swarm of goblins had already begun to feast on its carcass. He gritted his teeth, questioning whether he had received the experience points from the monster hitting the barrier. But the system quickly showed him otherwise. It revealed that he had gained a new skill and that loot nearby had met the necessary requirements. The system notified him that it was sorting out the loot. Suddenly, the goblins below roared in anger as the monster began to disappear, leaving them furious and empty-handed. The system then announced that the loot was complete, and he had earned 2,203,341 gold, which would be placed into his wallet. He stared at the notification, confused about what it all meant. To his surprise, the electricity in his room flickered back on. He turned around, eyes wide, wondering if he was dreaming. He questioned why the power had returned. Just then, another system message appeared, stating that his passive skill, House Declaration, had increased to level 3. Another system message appeared, notifying him that he had gained a new skill called Dignity Preservation. It was a passive skill at level 1, stating that half of his house's functions would be restored to help preserve his dignity. The message also revealed that his wallet was now at the maximum level and displayed the total amount inside. As he read the details, his attention shifted to the returning functions, and he suddenly screamed in excitement. Rushing to the fridge, he opened the door and smiled as the light inside flickered on. He checked the water faucet next and watched with joy as clean water flowed freely. Turning to the oven, he saw it powered on and functional once again. He stopped, overwhelmed by the realization that this wasn't a dream. Dropping to his knees, tears streamed down his face as he cried out in happiness, marveling at how everything in his apartment now worked like it had before the world had been turned upside down. He picked up his phone, wondering if the network was back online, but it was still down. Frustrated, he rubbed his head, annoyed at how long it was taking. As he looked around, something caught his eye. Among the rubbish scattered on the floor, he noticed a USB drive. Moments later, he had plugged it into his PC, curiosity driving him to see what was on it. The screen lit up with images, his mother holding him as a baby, another of her walking him to daycare, a family photo with both parents, and a picture from one of his birthdays. He gritted his teeth, his frustration mounting as he stared at the pictures. Memories flooded back, bittersweet and overwhelming. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself. With a firm expression, he resolved, "I need to bring my family to this place, no matter what." He stood up and walked over to the window, staring out into the distance as thoughts of his family filled his mind. The quiet moment was broken by the appearance of another system notification. It announced a new skill called the Store, now unlocked at level 1. The description stated that he could purchase items listed in the store at their original prices. He froze, staring at the notification in disbelief. Shocked, he questioned whether this store could actually be real. As if responding to his doubts, the system displayed his wallet balance. A new message popped up, asking if he wanted to list his first item. He paused, deep in thought, trying to make sense of this new skill. It seemed clear that his money was somehow connected to the shop. Wanting to test something, he walked over and opened the door leading to his balcony. As expected, the system immediately notified him that he could not leave his house. Letting out a sigh, he leaned against the barrier, staring out at the world beyond his reach. His thoughts lingered on how his skill had leveled up, yet the apartment's size or boundaries hadn't changed. Even so, one thing was clear in his mind. If he could somehow find a way to hurt monsters from within his apartment, he might be able to level up further, and with that, unlock a new skill. The possibility planted a seed of determination in him. He thought about the possibility of leveling up and unlocking a skill that might allow him to leave the apartment. However, he wondered how he could take down monsters in his current state. Seeing the monster outside, he thought back to his first takedown and realized it had been pure luck. However, as he looked at the monster's body, he noticed that it hadn't disappeared. Only the loot and money had been taken, leaving the meat behind. A sudden thought struck him. He might be able to take down the goblins from here, as they were too busy with the monster to notice him. He found a water bottle and stood by the door, carefully aiming outside before tossing it out the window. A smile spread across his face as he saw the bottle leave the barrier. It clicked in his mind, he could throw items out of his house. Excited by the discovery, he picked up a dumbbell weight, thinking about how he could use it to attack the goblins. He watched through the window as the goblins chatted among themselves, picking up some meat and preparing to leave. Frustration surged within him, and he shouted, "You can't leave." With a determined look, he took aim at the group and hurled the weight out the window, praying it wouldn't miss. The dumbbell weight smashed into the dead monster, sending a shockwave through the group of goblins. They quickly turned around, looking toward the source of the sound. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized he was in a bad position. The weight had hit the meat they were collecting, and now all the goblins were aware of him. Worse still, he only had one dumbbell weight left. He closed his eyes, leaning against the barrier outside, trying to calm himself. Thoughts raced through his mind. He wasn't strong, and his house didn't have many items that could help him in this situation. But then, a noise broke through his thoughts. The goblins had spotted him. They were all glaring at him, their faces twisted in anger. Panic surged through him as he realized how much trouble he was in. The goblins roared in anger, charging toward his building. He watched them approach, feeling the tension rise, but then something clicked in his mind. The distance wasn't too bad, he could use it to his advantage. A sudden realization struck him, he could use his store. He quickly opened the skill, and the system asked if he wanted to list an item. Without hesitation, he agreed. The system then prompted him to choose the item he wanted to list, and he selected the dumbbell. The system began scanning the weight, and soon a message appeared, stating that it was listing a 3 kilograms dumbbell. Another window popped up, showing that the dumbbell would be sold for 16,990 gold. His current balance was displayed below. He was surprised to see the system's price. It was the same as what he had originally paid for the dumbbell. He thought about how the market rate in the system seemed to reflect the prices before the world had been attacked. Then, the system asked if he wanted to buy the 3 kilograms dumbbell. A smile crept across his face as he eagerly agreed. In an instant, a light emitted from the system window, and the dumbbell materialized in front of him. He grinned with joy, realizing that his plan had worked. He picked up the dumbbell and remarked that it felt just like the real deal. With a determined look, he threw it at the group of goblins, hoping it would hit. The dumbbell flew through the air and smashed into one goblin's head, taking it down. The system chimed in, stating that he had defeated a level 7 goblin, gaining some experience and 3,345 gold. Excited, he saw the information and realized that his plan was working. However, the goblins, looking down at their fallen comrade, didn't have time to mourn. They quickly saw another weight flying toward them and jumped out of the way, now fully aware of the danger they were in, frustrated about how the weight had missed. His anger flared as he realized he had just spent all that money for nothing. Determined not to give up, he quickly bought more dumbbells. One by one, they appeared in front of him, ready for the next attack. Wasting no time, he threw another dumbbell, and it connected with the goblin, taking it down. The system immediately notified him that he had defeated a level 6 goblin, gaining 2,512 gold and increasing his skill. But that wasn't all. The system also revealed that he had gained a new skill. He smiled with excitement, thrilled that this was exactly what he wanted. Eager to try out his new skill, he looked at the new ability, Storage. At level 1, it was described as an alternate dimension where he could store items. Without hesitation, he decided to test it. He placed one of his dumbbells into the storage. The system then asked if he was sure he wanted to store the item. After confirming, the system noted that the 3 kilograms dumbbell had been successfully stored and asked if he wanted to summon it back. Grinning, he agreed, and in an instant, the weight reappeared in his hand. He felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing he now had a place to store things and bring them out whenever he needed them. He smiled with a devilish grin, his eyes glowing with excitement, as he thought about how this new skill would help him. A plan began to form in his mind. He started buying hand-storing dumbbells, each one adding to his growing collection. Once he felt confident, he opened his storage and held out his hand, closing his eyes as he pictured where he wanted the stored items to appear. In an instant, a barrage of dumbbells materialized in midair and then plummeted toward a group of unsuspecting goblins below. The goblins were caught off guard as the dumbbells smashed into them, taking them all down. 3 system windows popped up, one after the other, stating that he had defeated a level 5, level 6, and level 7 goblin. Another window followed, announcing that he had gained a large amount of experience and 54,660 gold. Finally, the system asked if he wanted to list more items. He smiled with satisfaction at all the rewards he had gained and eagerly agreed. A few minutes had passed, and he had placed 8 items, mostly food items, into the store, from a 5 kilograms bag of rice to 900 milliliters of canola oil. Feeling pleased with the large sum of gold he had accumulated, 2,178,806 gold from selling groceries and daily necessities. However, something felt off. As he glanced at the total gold, he saw that it read 2,178,805 gold. 1 gold was missing. He furrowed his brow, wondering if his passive skill Dignity Preservation had caused the discrepancy, as it was still active. He glanced over at his fridge and realized he had to pay for his power, water, and gas. The thought annoyed him as he got up, irritated by his new expenses. His mind drifted to the goblins. He had hunted them for a while, but they had eventually abandoned their old territory and run away. Since then, he had only been able to take down a few of them, and his frustration grew. He knew he needed to keep hunting monsters to sustain his passive skill and cover the costs of maintaining his home. As he stood there, he looked at the spot where he had taken down his first monster. A troubling realization hit him. Monsters had not come near him for a little while now. He looked to the sky and saw nothing. With a sigh, he commented that it would be nice if a dumb calico monster flew into the barrier again. Just as the words left his mouth, something caught his eye, a shadow of a flying monster. As it got closer, he realized it was indeed a calico monster. Shocked to see one after such a long time, he quickly ran to prepare something, muttering that someone up there must still be watching over him. A few minutes later, he had tied a mirror to a drying rack and placed it on the barrier's arm. Using the mirror, he angled the light to catch the monster's attention. The creature noticed the glint and roared, turning in his direction and flying straight toward him. He smiled as his plan seemed to work. Watching the monster rush toward him, he thought back to the first time a calican had hit the barrier and fallen. Excitement filled him as he imagined the experience and rewards he would gain when he leveled up. But this time, luck was not on his side. The monster stopped just short of the barrier, hovering in place. Before he could react, it turned and flew off in another direction. He leaned out, straining to see where it had gone, confusion and frustration filling his mind. Just then, a deafening roar came from above, making him freeze in place. Looking up, he saw the monster hovering directly over him, its menacing gaze locked onto him. Panic set in as fear spread across his face. The creature let out another roar, this one more aggressive, before lifting its head and slamming it into the barrier. The impact sent a ripple through the invisible shield as the system chimed in, stating that the monster was attempting to breach the barrier. Blow after blow, the creature attacked relentlessly. He stood there watching, his heart pounding in his chest. Fear gripped him, and his teeth clenched as uncertainty filled his mind. He couldn't tell if the barrier would hold much longer. He knew he needed to act fast. Opening up his store, he scrolled through the items, searching for anything that could help. As he reviewed his options, a realization struck him. He could only claim loot from monster corpses if they were nearby. This brought back bitter memories of his goblin hunts. The surviving goblins would often drag away their fallen, leaving him unable to claim their loot. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. His teeth grit as he thought about all the loot he had lost because of their actions. On top of that, he remembered the limitation of his range. Anything that fell outside of it was completely out of his reach. The thought made his anger flare as the monster continued its relentless assault on the barrier. He understood that he needed to prevent the bird from escaping his range and quickly devised a plan to bring it down in one strike. Recalling the canola oil available in the store, an idea formed in his mind. Without hesitation, he purchased 10 bottles of canola oil. When the system asked for confirmation, he agreed. A moment later, the bottles appeared before him. He gathered them all and rushed to the kitchen, grabbing a large pot. He poured all the oil into the pot and turned on the oven to heat it. While waiting, he grabbed a broom, wrapped a cloth tightly around its end, and secured it in place. Once the owl was sufficiently heated, he dipped the cloth-wrapped end into the pot, saturating it with the hot oil before setting it aside to cool slightly. Next, he opened his shop and told the system to list the remaining oil. The system acknowledged his request, and soon, the owl was listed. Satisfied, he grabbed a lighter, picked up the broomstick, and ignited the cloth. Flames engulfed the end of the stick as his plan began to take shape. A few moments later, he cautiously looked out the door and saw the monster resting just outside, seemingly recovering from its relentless attacks on the barrier. Gripping his flaming stick tightly, he called out to draw its attention. With precision, he purchased the canola oil from his store and commanded the system to pour it outside. Scalding oil rained down onto the unsuspecting bird, causing it to screech in agony as the liquid seared its feathers and skin. Seizing the moment, he raised his flaming stick and hurled it at the monster. The blazing projectile struck its target, and flames erupted across the bird's body. The creature let out a deafening roar, but it was too late. Fire engulfed it entirely. He stood back, a satisfied smile creeping across his face as he watched the inferno consume the monster. His plan had worked perfectly. A sense of doubt crept into his mind as he watched the bird thrash against the flames, refusing to surrender. Its movements slowed, but its determination lingered. Just as panic began to creep in, the fire finally consumed it, and with a final, weak roar, the bird collapsed. Then, the system chimed in. It announced that he had defeated a level 27 bird, earning a massive amount of experience points. His skills had leveled up, and to his surprise, he had also unlocked a new skill. The system began sorting the loot, and moments later, it was complete. He stared in awe as the system revealed his spoils: 9,347,487 gold, deposited directly into his wallet. He was stunned, his voice trembling with disbelief as he commented on nearly reaching 10 million gold. But just then, another notification appeared. The system declared that certain requirements had been met. The system announced that the house territory expansion would now begin. Suddenly, the entire apartment shook violently, forcing him to grab onto the nearest stable surface as panic set in. He shouted, demanding to know what was happening. Before he could fully process the chaos, a sharp pain shot through his head, and his vision blurred momentarily. When his sight cleared, his surroundings had transformed. His eyes glowed faintly, and everything appeared different. He could now see through the walls of his apartment. Confused and disoriented, he glanced down the hallway, his vision extending unnaturally far. To his astonishment, he spotted a family in another room. His heart raced as he questioned how people could possibly be on the same floor as him. As he focused more closely, the realization hit him. The family wasn't just nearby. They were in the apartment directly next to his. Shocked and full of questions, he wondered how he had never noticed their presence before. He rubbed his head, struggling to understand what was happening to him. He recalled seeing a family, and as his eyes began to return to normal, a sharp pain struck his head. He muttered to himself, commenting that he had just seen a family. Suddenly, the system displayed information about the family: husband Choi Hyung-jun, in his late 30s, his wife Park Hae-won, and their children Choi Nin and Choi Soo-in. The system stated that it had found beings who met the requirements to become citizens and asked if he wanted to grant the family citizenship. He paused, considering the system's request. He wondered what would happen if he didn't grant them citizenship, and the system informed him that the family would be kicked out of the house and sent into the dangers of the outside world. Thinking about his own family, he realized that if he didn't act, they would be exposed to monsters. With that, he commanded the system to grant the family citizenship. The system confirmed the offer, and he felt he had made the right choice for them. Afterward, he realized he may have gained new skills and wanted to check. The system revealed his new skill, Ultimate Eyes, at level 1. It stated that nothing within his territory could escape his sight. He understood that this was how he had seen the family earlier, but he now wondered where the information about his citizens was. The system then displayed another skill, Ruler's Declaration, now at level 6. It showed the management of the people within his territory. He opened the system to view the family and saw their levels, along with how much they trusted him. His current population was listed as 4 out of 600. Seeing the large number, he wondered if it was a mistake. He then clicked on the father, Choi Hyun-jun, and saw that he had no class or skills. The system presented him with the options to either give him a quest or kick him out. He focused on the rate of the experience and distribution, wondering if it referred to how much the citizens would share with him. He also questioned whether he could control the amount. A smile spread across his face as he realized that this was likely the way he was meant to grow stronger. He went to give the father a quest and saw the form he needed to fill out. After looking it over, he decided on a quest to hunt a goblin, with a time limit of 168 hours, offering a small amount of experience and no penalty for failure. As he considered the details, he wondered how far he could push the failure condition. He edited the quest to state that death would be the penalty for failure. The system displayed the change and asked if he wanted to proceed. He hesitated, then decided against it and cancelled the quest. He sat down, now understanding that, if he wanted to, he could even end people. He looked up, questioning if this was all part of his class and wondering what he should do next. Deciding to activate his eye skill, everything changed color. He noticed he could see everything around him, including Park questioning her husband on what they should do. He heard her husband, Choi Hyung-jun, say that he needed to go out and find some water, asking her to wait with the kids. Park, however, disagreed, stating that she was against it. As Park questioned if there was any water out there, Choi Hyung-jun commented that he would go to a supermarket and hope he could find some. Just then, Seoin, their daughter, stated that she was thirsty, and Jun knew he needed to act. He reassured her, saying she should trust him, and that he would bring some water back. He told her to wait for him. Park, knowing they needed water, could only close her eyes, understanding the situation. At that moment, he stopped using his ultimate eyes skill. He saw that their situation was worse than he thought. Opening his shop, he scanned the item list and considered how helpful it would be if he could store more things. He then opened his skill window and noticed his 3 skills. To his delight, he saw that he had 3 points available to spend on one of his skills. A smile spread across his face as he realized this was exactly what he had been looking for. The system asked if he wanted to upgrade his store skill, and he agreed. A soft glow enveloped the interface as the system announced that the skill was now level 2. It revealed that he could list up to 20 items and would now receive a 10% discount on purchases. Understanding the importance of increasing his ability to list items, he nodded with satisfaction. His mind then turned to the 2 remaining points he could allocate. He considered adding another point to his store, then one to his passive skill, Dignity Preservation. Believing he might encounter more people, he decided to upgrade again. Now at level 3, the store's maximum capacity had increased to 40, and it gained the ability to restore items. He realized this meant he could turn old items into new ones. Feeling satisfied with his decision, he smiled and opened his store. He then purchased some bottled water and tangerines before adding another point to his Dignity Preservation skill. He realized that if he could supply electricity and water to his neighbors, he could ask for many things in return. The system informed him that the skill had reached level 2 and now allowed him to register vassals. He sat quietly, pondering what that might entail. Meanwhile, June was preparing to leave. He glanced back at his family, their faces filled with worrying. Forcing a reassuring smile, he reminded his children to protect their home and promised he would return soon. His daughter hesitated, questioning if he was truly leaving. He reassured her, saying he would be quick, as he was only going to fetch food and water. He then asked her to take care of her mother. Despite his words, she grew upset and yelled, saying there were monsters outside. Her words brought a flood of memories back to June. He recalled the day everything fell apart, the day monsters appeared. The chaos terrified his children. They screamed and ran as he and his wife desperately scooped them up and fled to safety. The memory of that day returned vividly, reigniting the fear he had worked so hard to suppress. His children began to cry, their distress tugging at his heart. June understood this might be the last time he would see them. He struggled to hold back his own tears, knowing he had to stay strong for their sake. Just then, a knock echoed from the front door, freezing him in place. He turned back in fear as his wife quickly gathered the children, holding them close. Silence enveloped the room, as all eyes fixed on the door. Then, a voice came from the other side, asking softly if they could please open it. Chun's heart raced as panic surged through him. He clenched his fists, bracing himself for the worst, and questioned whether the voice belonged to a person or something else. The voice asked if anyone was there, and they all did their best to remain quiet. June stood ready, gripping his golf club, but after a long moment, nothing happened. He wondered if whatever it was had gone, and questioned what it could even be. Just then, the door opened on its own, sending a wave of panic through him. He immediately rushed to protect his family, shouting that he had kids. A calm voice called out, asking if he was alright. June looked up, his heart still racing, and saw a man standing there. His confusion deepened as he took in the stranger's presence. The man introduced himself as Kim Jae-in, explaining that he lived next door, holding two large bags. He offered the family some water and tangerines, then asked if they could have a chat while they ate and drank. June considered the offer, looking at his family and their needs. He realized he had no reason to refuse, so he nodded and invited Kim to come inside. Moments later, they sat down at the table. Chun's kids eyed Kim with suspicion, glaring at him from across the room. Kim wondered if he had frightened them too much. As his gaze wandered, he noticed the blackout curtains and silently appreciated the clever idea. It made sense monsters would have a harder time spotting them. Looking up, he decided to add some light. He activated his dignity preservation skill in Chun's house. Kim looked over at the items he had brought while June, surprised, watched the lights flicker back on. The sudden brightness filled the room, bringing a sense of calm. Kim then handed a bottle of water to June, explaining it was for his kids. June thanked him and passed one to each of them. The children quickly drank, eager to hydrate after not having enough for some time. One of them coughed, prompting the mother to ask if she was alright. Seeing how quickly the children drank the water, Kim wondered if they were also hungry. He offered the youngest a tangerine, and she gratefully thanked him. As she reached for it, she drooled in anticipation, and her mother gently took it from her, commenting that she would prepare it for her. Moments later, the mother offered a piece to the youngest, who eagerly bit into it. Her eyes lit up, and she smiled, savoring the sweetness. Her mother observed and commented that it must have been good, to which the youngest happily agreed. The eldest daughter, seeing how much her sister enjoyed the tangerine, wanted to try it as well. Her mother gave her a piece, and she smiled with joy after tasting it. Just then, the system chimed, indicating that the family's trust in Kim had increased. Seoin's trust reached 50, and the system announced that loyalty had been unlocked. It then noted that Seoin's loyalty was now over 30, and with that, Choi Seoin had met the requirements to become a vassal. He looked over Seoin's stats and saw that she had no class and was level 2. He studied her for a moment, realizing that while she met the requirements, she was still just a child. He would never put a child in danger. Unlike others who might join him, he knew he could only select 10 vassals, and they needed to be at least at the same level as June. This was important, as it ensured that his orders would be achievable and that they could effectively contribute to his goals. Kim glanced at Chun's stats and saw that he was level 9, but his trust was only at 31. He wondered how he could improve his trust with him. Just then, June called out, surprising Kim. June thanked him for his kindness, unsure of how to repay it. Kim then asked if they could step into the hallway for a chat, and June agreed. Moments later, they were outside, and Kim asked if Chun's family had received citizenship. June replied that they had received it about 30 minutes ago. Kim then asked if anything unusual had happened during that time. June explained that they couldn't move for a bit, and Kim understood. It seemed that people who entered would be frozen until they received citizenship. Kim then got down to business, stating that he would help return the life they had before all this happened by providing water, power, and food. June was confused by the offer. Kim clarified that he could ensure monsters would not be able to enter his house. June, skeptical, questioned how that was possible. Kim assured him that it could be done, but he needed June to trust him. June, sensing there was more to the offer, understood that Kim wanted something in return. He looked at him and asked what he needed. Kim explained that he might lose his life while carrying out the plan and asked if June was willing to try. June thought of his family's smiles from just moments ago and, with determination, firmly stated that he would join him. He added that he was already putting his life on the line, as he was about to go out to get water before Kim had arrived. Kim smiled, pleased with Chun's resolve. Then, he asked how much Chun's club had cost. June, confused, replied that it had cost around 4 million gold. Kim nodded, understanding that it was too expensive for his store and that he needed to save for the future. June questioned why Kim had asked about the cost of his club, but Kim simply commented that it was nothing. He then asked if June remembered when the monsters had appeared. June nodded and replied that they arrived on the weekend. He recalled the fear of that moment, commenting that it had been horrifying. Kim nodded, his expression thoughtful, and said that those who stayed home probably survived. He understood that a single goblin wasn't very strong and that they were weaker than most humans. However, their strength came from their numbers, which is why they always traveled in groups. He realized that it was the same for humans. To survive and protect his family, he would need to create an army of his own. Kim called out to June, who was standing there waiting. He then stated that he wanted June to help him look for survivors, suggesting that they search together. Time passed, and Kim was back in his room. He noticed that Chun's trust had increased, a small but reassuring sign of progress. Turning his attention to the system, he checked the list of people under his management and saw that it had reached 40. As he stared at the growing number, he couldn't help but wonder if, by continuing to take people in little by little, he might one day see his own family again. Suddenly, the sound of battle snapped Kim out of his thoughts. He quickly got up and walked to his door to look outside. To his shock, he saw a group of people fighting, but they were just outside his range of influence. Goblins roared as chaos unfolded. His attention was drawn to one individual who hurled a baseball with such force that it struck a goblin in the head, sending it flying backward. Kim couldn't help but question the strength of that person. Then, he noticed another figure skillfully fire 2 arrows in quick succession, each one striking true and taking down 2 goblins in an instant. Kim noticed another person wielding a bat, leaping into action and striking a goblin with overwhelming force. The remaining goblins, terrified, scattered and fled, unwilling to face such power. The group stood on guard, scanning the area to ensure it was safe. Suddenly, something caught the archer's eye. She instinctively readied an arrow, aiming at what appeared to be a packet of instant noodles lying nearby. As she looked up, she spotted a shadowy figure watching them. It was Kim, waving at her frantically from his doorway. Confused, she lowered her bow slightly, unsure of his intentions. Before Kim could explain, a sudden knock at his door drew his attention. Turning, he saw June standing there. Kim opened the door and welcomed June inside. June thanked him and started to step through, but he was stopped by an invisible barrier. Both stood there, confused by what had just happened. The system chimed in, stating that June was not qualified to enter the house. June frowned, questioning what that could mean. Kim paused, deep in thought, trying to figure it out. He began to suspect it might be because June wasn't a vassal. Still uncertain, he chose not to voice his thoughts and stepped outside instead. Picking up the box June had brought, he asked what was inside. June explained that he had put everything that could serve as a weapon in it as he had asked. Kim opened the box and inspected the items June had gathered. After a moment, he activated his store and purchased 5 bottles of water and 5 packets of noodles. The items materialized in front of him, leaving June visibly shocked at how food and water had simply appeared out of nowhere. Without explaining further, Kim placed the supplies into the box and turned to June. He asked if June could carry the box down to the ground floor and leave it at the entrance. June hesitated, questioning why Kim wanted the box taken to the ground floor and whether it was dangerous. Kim reassured him, explaining that he would be fine. He pointed out that goblins were typically active during the day, and with the sun now setting, the danger was minimal. As June considered his words, Kim thought about the group he had seen earlier. He realized that placing the box at the entrance could serve as a gesture of goodwill, potentially drawing those people to his side. They would have no choice but to seek him out once they realized he could provide food. Kim mentioned that he had a plan and asked June to assist him. June confirmed that all he needed to do was leave the box at the entrance and then return. Kim agreed, and June remarked that it sounded simple enough. With that, June said goodbye, and Kim expressed his gratitude. Kim stopped June and asked him to wait for a moment. Opening the system window, he decided to do something nice for someone as helpful as June. He created a quest for him to bring the food to the entrance and return within 24 hours. The reward was a small amount of experience points, and there was no penalty for failure. June received the quest notification and looked puzzled. He asked what it meant, and Kim explained that completing it would earn him experience points. June then questioned if it worked like leveling up in a game. Kim confirmed this and mentioned that Chun's current level was 9. Kim smiled and mentioned that when June leveled up, he would receive even better rewards, emphasizing that he was counting on him. June did his best to look confident, nodding before saying he was off. Time passed, and June stood at the exit of his level, gripping his club. He began walking down from level 20 to level 19. A few minutes later, he reached the ground floor and stepped outside the building. Rubbing his head, he thought to himself that he just needed to find a spot to set the box down somewhere around there. As June tried to hurry, something caught his eye, a group of shadows moving in the distance. He immediately thought it might be goblins. Panic set in, and he turned to leave, but his foot slipped, and he fell, dropping the box of food. He lay there in pain, but quickly realized he needed to move. However, it was too late. Fear gripped his face as he screamed, thinking it was over for him. Just then, he heard a human voice, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a group of people standing over him. One of them asked if he was alright. Time passed, and back in his room, Kim received a notification that someone who hadn't been granted permission was trying to enter. He wondered if it had something to do with June. Wasting no time, he activated his skill and went to investigate. He saw the group from before standing at the entrance, with June among them. He overheard the archer commenting that this was the place where the pocket of noodles had fallen. The person with the bat questioned if this place might have food, while the person with the baseball remarked that they were running low on supplies and needed food. Kim realized that he had a huge opportunity on his hands. Just then, the system chimed in, stating that beings who met the requirements for citizenship were approaching. It asked if Kim would like to offer them citizenship. Kim realized this situation was different from before. When his territory expanded, he had the ability to forcefully grant citizenship to those within it. But people coming from the outside were given a choice. He rubbed his head in confusion, understanding that they could refuse his offer. He wondered what he could do to convince them. As he pondered his options, a noise caught his attention, pulling him back to the moment. Kim noticed the screen making a noise and realized it might be June. He quickly went over to answer the call and saw Chun's face on the screen. June questioned if Kim could hear him, to which Kim replied, "Give me a moment." He then pulled up Chun's quest and began to make changes. The system confirmed that he could modify the quest. A smile crossed Kim's face as he devised a plan. He changed the quest to treat 6 guests to a meal. The system chimed in, confirming that the quest had been updated. June, seeing the updated quest, questioned what was going on. Kim explained that it was a new quest and asked if he could tell the group that he could offer them food. He added that he had a plan, and June agreed to help. June walked over to the group and explained that he could provide them with food, but they had to obey the rules. After a moment, he returned and informed Kim that the group was willing to accept the offer. Kim then went ahead and extended an invitation for all 6 of them to join him. The system confirmed that the offer had been sent to the 6 people. As the group began to pass through the barrier, the system chimed in again, announcing that they had joined and gained access to the 30th level. The group stood there as the system announced that Kim had reached 10 citizens. It also noted that the amount of experience and money each person could earn had increased by 10%. Kim smiled at the new effects, feeling a sense of satisfaction. These buffs would be incredibly helpful for his people, especially when they went hunting. Kim was pleased with the improvements, knowing that they would make a significant difference as they faced the challenges ahead. The system then displayed the new 6 people. Ha Donghyun, level 23 with a trust of 19. Kang Deoksu, level 13 with a trust of 28. Kim Gang, level 17 with a trust of 17. Yu Hyerin, level 10 with a trust of 30. Kim Jeon, level 11 with a trust of 15. And Moon Byung-ho, level 10 with a trust of 11. Kim wasn't sure who was who yet but focused on Ha Donghyun, who was level 23, as they would be as strong as the bird he had faced earlier. Kim checked the stats and noticed that Ha Donghyun had a skill called Baseball Throw. The effect of the skill consumed stamina to increase throw power by 3 times. Kim realized that Ha Donghyun had a class, and he recalled that a baseball could become a weapon depending on who was throwing it. With the power increase, it seemed perfect for hunting monsters. Kim understood that he could work on building trust with Ha Donghyun and set the loot rate for all 6 people at 70%. The system confirmed the change, and Kim smiled, thinking that all he needed to do now was give quests to hunt monsters. He could relax and earn both money and experience, seeing it as a form of auto-hunting, much like in a game. However, there was one problem: he still needed to get to know these new people. Kim understood that these 6 could help him find his family, and that thought motivated him to build stronger bonds with them. Just then, the system notified Kim that Ha Donghyun's trust had increased. He looked confused as another message appeared, stating that Kim Gaeung's trust had also increased, followed by a message about Yoo Hyun's trust going up as well. Kim stared at the window, questioning what was going on and how their trust had increased so quickly without any direct interaction. Meanwhile, June welcomed the new people into his house. His wife, noticing the unexpected guests, questioned what was going on. June told her he would explain later, but asked her to prepare food for them. She commented that it would take some time, and June nodded, understanding. He then asked her to help, mentioning that Kim had a plan. Upon hearing Kim's name, his wife understood that he was the one helping them and agreed, stating she would start preparing right away. As she looked over at the guests, Chun's wife asked if they could wait a moment, and they agreed. Ha Donghyun looked around, curious about everything, but then questioned June on what kind of person Kim was. June replied that he wasn't sure either, which Han found odd. June explained that he didn't know anything about Kim other than the fact that he was their neighbor. Han nodded, understanding that Kim was close by then. June then asked them to sit down and commented that Kim was an interesting person, noting that this house was all thanks to him. Ha Donghyun understood that Kim was someone with skill and had a class. As he looked down at the food, he realized that Kim must have amazing abilities to be able to provide all this. Han knew then that impressing Kim was important, no matter what. Ha Donghyun understood that Kim was someone powerful enough to provide food, water, and power, recognizing that his skills made him incredibly strong. Han realized that Kim was on an entirely different level compared to himself. The abilities Kim possessed gave him the advantage to control vital resources, making him someone not to be underestimated. Just then, June offered if they would like to take a shower while the food was being prepared. The ladies in the group perked up at the mention of a shower, with one questioning if they could really use it. Ha Donghyun was shocked, realizing that if there was power in the house, most of the facilities must still be functional. He wondered about the possibilities this meant. June then added that there was also warm water, which caused the ladies to be even more surprised. June explained that the warm water, along with everything else, was part of Kim's skills. June then commented that there was one in the bathroom and another in the master room, offering to show them the way. He mentioned they could wash up at the same time. The ladies both thanked him, clearly impressed, as they marveled at how amazing everything seemed. Meanwhile, a person with glasses stated that Kim must have abilities and a class, to which Ha Donghyun commented that Kim would probably be stronger than him. The person with the bat shrugged, saying it was fine and that he just needed to give Kim a good beating. Ha Donghyun, annoyed, snapped and asked what he was talking about, adding that they needed to impress Kim, not think about fighting him. The person with the bat was completely oblivious and had no idea what Ha Donghyun was talking about. Ha, feeling frustrated, begged him to stay quiet and not do anything. The person reluctantly agreed. Ha then stated that their goal was to find as much food as they could and emphasized that they should act in a polite manner here. Both of them agreed to what Ha had said, realizing the importance of making a good impression. Meanwhile, a person in the back looked worried, and Ha Donghyun noticed him. He walked over and called out to him, addressing him as Moon Byung-ho. Moon, looking confused, replied that he didn't catch what Ha said. Ha apologized, but Moon reassured him, saying he had done nothing wrong. Ha then commented that if he hadn't invited them all to his housewarming. However, Moon cut him off, stating that he wanted to go to his housewarming. Ha then stated that once they got the food, they would head straight to Moon's grandmother's place together. Moon agreed, but a sad expression crossed his face. He couldn't shake the thought that it might already be too late. As he thought about the monsters and his grandmother, doubt filled his mind. He wasn't sure if she would still be alive. Ha commented that the place was nearby and that they could reach it if they worked together. He encouraged Moon to hang in there for a bit longer, and Moon did his best to muster some courage, agreeing to the plan. However, just as they were settling into the moment, they sensed something approaching. The door creaked open, and a shadow loomed in the doorway. Ha immediately felt a sense of danger and quickly readied his baseball, tense and prepared. Then, Kim entered the room. Kim stepped into the room, offering his help. Ha, still holding his ball, lowered his arm as he studied the stranger at the door. He realized that with this person's assistance, they might just have a chance to face the huge problem that loomed ahead. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and like. It really helps me out.